of the biggest surprises in 2021 for me was Vince Staples' self-titled album, in more ways than one too. Firstly, I was surprised at how much I liked it to begin with. Then I was surprised at how much it grew on me and ended up being in my year-end list for the year 2021, which I did not expect. And then the third surprise really was the reception towards it. I was so shocked to see so many people not really think it was that good, when I personally think it's his best album to date, which is so ironic in how when you have a favourite album by artists that everyone else is pretty lukewarm on, you kind of feel like you're left out in the cold. It's a bittersweet irony, really. I understand his niche so far that he's carved out has been pretty all over the place. He's never really stuck to one particular sound. Each album feels like it's birthed out a completely different environment. The feelings, the emotions behind each album is different too. What I typically grew towards, or I guess I was pulled towards with the self-titled album, was just how emotionally flat Vince sounded. He sounded so tired and pained the whole way through. I just think everything about the gangster lifestyle that he's talked about in previous albums has finally caught up with him, and he's hit a point now where seeing too many things and too many tragedies in front of him in his life has just taken an insane toll on him, and I thought he presented that brilliantly on the album. And to an extent, I would argue that Ramona Park Broke My Heart is a sister album to self-titled. I mean, they've only come really about a year-ish apart, even less than that, to be honest, actually. So you can see the parallels there in the emotions once again, but this time around I would probably say it's less about the things he's seeing in his life take a toll on him, although he still touches on those things. But I would say it's more about his personal life, you know, the people in his life that have impacted him, have affected him, and it's more focusing on himself this time around rather than the things he's seeing. The track I Free the Homies, in brackets, is, in parentheses you could say as well, is a track where, again, it's kind of like trying to see what impact he can have on the people he loves and what he can do. So of course, if he had one wish, he would free all the homies. Again, on self-titled, there wasn't quite that kind of angle. It was more just how everything just is kind of piling up on him and everything's just tumbling around him, essentially. Whereas, you know, this track here is kind of thinking, oh, what can I do? What can I personally do to help people? And interestingly, with this track, he's gone in a bit more of a West Coast direction with the beat, with the instrumental. It works for him, to be fair. He sounds good over this. So many of the other tracks as well are definitely in this West Coast flair. I think he's definitely upped the ante in that sense this time around. On this album with that sound, he's definitely pushing more towards it with tracks like DJ Quick, which obviously is a very clear reference. I will say though, some of these tracks, as good as some of the beats are, like the hooks themselves are kind of lacking a little bit, and I think this track is a good example of that, where it's just way too low key. Magic as well, which basically has Mustard on the beat, very 2014. I feel like I heard this track so many times when I would just kind of have a quick peep, you know, some songs in the charts in America particularly, because that was how DJ Mustard kind of got his big I guess big break. It was more so an American thing than it was a UK thing, and this track just sounds like something from that era. So yeah, I think saying this is dated isn't too much of a far reach, to be honest. But this track itself is a bit more about how he's not going to snitch on people, and I don't know if that's as poignant as some of the other topics he's sung about on this album and on his previous one, to be honest. And there were a few other moments as well that I wasn't quite as into, to be honest. They're not necessarily bad, but they just don't quite strike me as much as I'd like. I thought East Point Prayer was pretty okay. I just think Lil Baby's feature didn't really do much for me. I've tried so hard with Lil Baby, you know. There's so many other trap artists that are in a very similar lane that I think are really good, and I've talked about in length on this channel. You know, Kachais, for example, 1000 Band Forney. I could go on and on and on, but Lil Baby just does nothing for me, man. His voice still isn't really clicking with me at all, but I think the rest of the track is pretty good. I just would have preferred it without a Lil Baby feature. And then When Sparks Fly, I thought this was one of the more emotive tracks, to be honest, in terms of the lyrics and Vince's delivery. I do think it is pretty good for that, but the hollow beat, I mean, I guess the hollowness is matching the hollow emotions, maybe just the kind of like emptiness that Vince is kind of presenting, maybe. But I just thought the beat itself really lacked massively. The losing someone aspect was really beautiful, to be honest. It was presented excellently, and then of course at the end with the I Keep Calling, you know, repeated for the ending of the song was pretty heartbreaking too. And while we're on the negatives, I guess Slide, the hook wasn't too good. And this is the thing that I thought got a bit underappreciated about Self-Titled, was that the hooks were actually really catchy. Like, I thought a lot of people were really harsh on how the album was very low key and didn't really do much for them, which is fair enough. I mean, it's personal to you. But actually, when you sat with the album for longer, some of the hooks were really catchy, and I thought tracks like Slide just missed that, to be honest. Papercuts for me though was where I was like, yeah, this is the Vince I like. The hook is so catchy. It's so, you know, sing-alongy as well. I feel like Vince, when he does these kinds of hooks, he's really in his bag, to be honest. I think it sounds great. He loves his bread too. He loves his bread. He talks about bread so much. Is it Hovis? Kingsmill? Warburton's? Tesco's Finest? Tesco's Finest bread, man? It's actually pretty good. Vince, check out Tesco's Finest bread. Lemonade touches on the West Coast vibe once again. It's not like coming through on every track, but when it comes through strong. And I thought the YG-ishness about it was really fun and catchy too. Like when YG puts together a really fun and catchy West Coast banger, you're just so on board with it. Yeah, I'm thinking tracks like Still Brazy, you know, tracks like that on the Still Brazy album, so good. Playaways I thought was quite an interesting insight. It didn't feel like it was just bragging about being a player. It was more about how being a player impacts the people around him and impacts, well, particularly the women around him in relationships, and impacts himself, because he doesn't really know how to take it beyond that. He still feels like he wants a wife, but until the sun comes up, that's enough for him. I thought it was an interesting presentation of the track. To be honest, it was refreshing to see a more reflective approach taken with that, rather than just bragging about how many girls he gets and how he doesn't care about anything else. Like, it felt a bit better in that presentation. I think Vince is, as he's progressing through his career, he is getting better with his lyrics. I think Rose Street's one of the best tracks too, honestly. I think there's something freaky about it though, with the way it sounds so upbeat and so energetic, and yet you listen to the lyrics and it's so depressing. I thought that juxtaposition was really like, ooh, a bit kind of weird to get with. But I would say that's probably the point in what he's trying to do. He did this on FM as well. That was one of the biggest selling points for FM. Personally, wasn't keen on many of the hooks on that thing, so it didn't end up landing very well for me. But in terms of how he presents the upbeat, catchy songs with the depressing lyrics, it worked quite well for that, and I think this track does it as well. And once again, with that personal angle that I think he's tackling these tracks from, where he's talking about bringing flowers to the homie's grave. Again, not necessarily talking about his surroundings, but he's talking about the actual impact it's having on him personally in his personal life, which again is what I say about this album. I think it is tackling these topics in that kind of way this time around, compared to his other projects. So yeah, overall a lot to like and a lot to praise. I think for me there's just a few too many duds in the track list, or not necessarily duds, but just moments in the midsection of the album where like each track just had something about it that I wasn't that keen on. So it wasn't like each track was bad, it was just there was something about it. It was either the beat, the guest feature, the hook, like there was just something like a stringing along like each track that was just like, yeah, I don't know if I like that too much. But without comparing it too much to Self-Titled, I think it is offering something a bit different to that anyway. But for me, I think if he had chopped down this track list to something similar to the length of the kind of 20-ish minute thing that he's been doing for a few albums now, I probably would have ended up liking it a bit more. But I'm in the minority with self-titled anyway, like as an example of a shorter album. A lot of his fan base wasn't as big on that one as his other ones, so I guess I'm flip-flopping my opinion here. This one for me is a bit worse, but I think a lot of people are actually going to think this one's a bit better. Go figure, go figure. I'm going to go 6 out of 10. I do think it's pretty good, just not quite as striking or as poignant as I think Vince can be. His pen game is good on this album, but I think he could take it a step further. He's kind of getting there, I think, in terms of just like giving us more of an insight to who he is as a person and his life. He did it really well on self-titled, and I think he could probably even top that one, to be honest. If I'm being truthfully honest with you, I think he probably could. But yeah, it's good. It's good. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would like to see what you guys think. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.